The secret behind why 96% of adults never act on their biggest life-changing idea isn't circumstance. It's a habit society taught them early. Play small to stay safe. You know that feeling, when a bold idea comes into your mind, but instead of acting on it, you pause and think, am I even allowed to do this? No one stops you, but you freeze. You wait for approval, a green light, a yes, and you never begin. That's what kills big thinking, not loudly, not with drama, but quietly. By whispering in your mind, don't stand out, don't be too much, don't leave the safe zone. I know that voice. I used to hear it every day, and if I let it win, you would have never heard of Tesla. There would be no SpaceX, no mission to push humanity beyond Earth. Stay with me. I'm going to share with you 8 invisible but deadly habits that silently shrink your life, even if you don't realize it. Not through motivation, through the exact truths I had to tear out of myself, layer by layer, limit by limit. And if you're brave enough to face them, you won't live the same after this. This isn't just another inspiring video you'll forget in 5 minutes. This is a map to get out of the mental system that's been limiting you since childhood. And if you want to go further like this video, share it with someone who's also stuck and hit subscribe so you don't miss the rest of the Mind of Musk series. This channel exists for one reason: to help you dismantle every false belief the system installed in your mind. No hype, no fluff, just cold truths, and how to break them, exactly the way I did. Have you ever stopped before acting on an idea just because you asked yourself, am I even allowed to do this? No one blocked you, but you froze. You didn't send that proposal. You didn't start that project. You didn't move until someone said yes. That habit kills every chance of thinking big before it's even born. The system is designed for you to wait. Schools teach you to follow instructions, not ask too many questions. Jobs teach you to stay in your lane, follow protocol. Society teaches you to seek approval before you dare to stand out. We grow up with this unspoken belief. You need permission to do anything significant. But the things that truly change the world never waited for a green light. I used to wait. Before Tesla, I thought the auto industry had to first accept the idea of electric cars before I could start. But they never accepted it. They laughed. They called electric cars a joke. If I had waited for them to believe, Tesla wouldn't exist. I also waited for NASA to embrace the idea of private rockets. But NASA didn't need a company like SpaceX. They had their own system, their own budget, their own reasons to say no. If I waited for permission from them, no launches would have ever happened. I realized that if you need permission, it means you don't truly believe in your idea. Permission doesn't come from the outside. It comes from one decision inside you. Either you do it, or you keep waiting. Waiting for someone else's approval is like handing over control of your life to a stranger, to a system that doesn't care about your dream. People often ask me, Elon, how do you know you can do it? I don't know. I don't need to know. I only know it must be done. And if I don't do it, no one else will. Everything else, technology, people, funding, finds its way after you decide to stop waiting. Think about the times you stopped, not because you lacked skill, but because you were afraid of getting it wrong, afraid of being criticized, afraid of being called crazy. But here's a cold truth. Those who are called crazy today are the ones the world claps for tomorrow. Steve Jobs was called delusional. Nikola Tesla was called insane. And I've been called worse. I didn't wait for a nod to do what I believed was right. Remember this, every big breakthrough begins in silence, when no one gives you permission, when no one believes, when every signal says stop. That's when you have to keep going. You don't need another yes. You need one decision that you'll do it even if you stand alone. People say I'm reckless. I'm not. I just don't wait. Because waiting is the fastest way to never begin. There's a moment when you realize no one is coming to save you. No green light, no approval, no guarantee. Just you and your idea. When that moment comes, you'll know whether you're truly living or still waiting for permission to exist. Don't choose existence. The world doesn't need another person waiting. It needs someone willing to flip their own switch. You will never do anything great if you constantly live under the gaze of an invisible jury. Every idea you have, you ask yourself, what will people think? Every move you make, you hesitate. Will I look ridiculous? And every time you want to go big, you pause. Because your mind is occupied by a crowd that doesn't live in your head, yet controls every choice you make. That's a kind of mental prison. No bars, but tighter than any locked door. I know that feeling. There were times when I thought I had to present the image of a CEO, dress the part, speak in polished sound bites, keep investors, employees, media, and the public happy. But I hated it. I felt like I was playing a role I never signed up for. I didn't build this world to earn applause. I built it based on logic I believed in, even if it went against everything others expected. The problem isn't society's judgment. The problem is that you believe society has the right to judge you. And once you give away that power, you lose your ability to lead. You can only follow. No one changes the world by trying to be liked. If I had done what most people expected, I would have become a refined replica, polished but pointless. Tesla wouldn't exist if I feared what the auto industry thought. SpaceX wouldn't have launched if I needed NASA's approval. Neuralink wouldn't be real if I waited for humanity to feel ready for brain implants. The truth is, the crowd is always late. They only believe once you succeed. They only validate when the risk is over. They only clap when it's safe. But if you wait for that, you'll never have anything worth their applause. There's a kind of freedom I've always craved, and it's the same freedom the system fears you might have, the freedom to think without being tied to external expectations, the freedom to imagine something insane and not need a nod, the freedom to act without needing it to make sense to anyone else, the freedom to fail publicly and not feel ashamed, because you don't define yourself by their reaction. Their reaction only reflects their delay, not your value. I've called it out-of-phase thinking. When you do something no one else has done, the first response is always rejection. People fear what they don't understand. They laugh at what they can't control. They hate what they don't dare do themselves. But that's the signal you're on the right path. If everyone feels comfortable with your decisions, you're probably doing something too ordinary. I never tried to be different to get attention. I just stayed so honest with myself that I couldn't do anything else. And over time, that became different. Society will always have something to say. They'll call you arrogant, delusional, reckless. But eventually, they'll call you a pioneer. A game changer, a visionary. Not because you pleased them, but because you never needed to. I don't care how many people like me. I care whether I'm moving in the right direction. And that, for me, is enough. If you still define yourself through the eyes of the crowd, you'll stay in the safe zone they approve of. But if you're brave enough to live by what you believe, even when everyone turns away, that's when you truly enter the space where difference is made. Innovation is not born from the courage to be accepted. It's born from the silence of knowing no one understands you and doing it anyway. That's not rebellion. That's freedom. There's a phrase that sounds harmless but reveals a mind fully domesticated by the system. I don't know how to do that. And then they stop. They drop the idea, close the dream, pivot to something safer, more familiar, more teachable. But there's a question I've trained myself to throw straight at my own head whenever that phrase shows up. Who has ever known how to do something that's never been done? No one knew how to make reusable rockets until we did. No one knew how to design an electric car that was beautiful, powerful, and mainstream until we did. No one knew how to link the human brain to a computer until my team at Neuralink turned it into an experiment. I don't know where people got the idea that not knowing means stop, but I know this. That belief is the ceiling for 99% of human potential. The education system doesn't teach you to discover the unknown. It teaches you to memorize the approved. You get rewarded for recall, penalized for deviation. You grow up with a dangerous assumption. If you don't know how, you're not allowed to try. That's why most bold ideas die at inception, not from lack of resources, but because the thinker believed they weren't qualified. But I've seen top engineers stuck while a so-called amateur with no credentials asked one question that unlocked the problem. Not because they were smarter, but because they weren't bound by the belief that you have to know before you begin. The mindset of, I don't know so I won't act, doesn't just kill initiative. It kills the hunger to learn. I don't have a PhD in physics, but I've read hundreds of books on it. I've interviewed those smarter than me. I've asked questions others were too embarrassed to ask. I've broken problems down to first principles. And I never cared about looking dumb. Because the goal isn't to appear smart, it's to understand. The truth is, people aren't afraid of what they don't know. They're afraid of being seen as someone who doesn't know. They'd rather sit silently in a room of wrong answers than ask one right question that might expose them. That silence is the foundation of mediocrity. I'm not smarter than most people I meet, but I'm more relentless about drilling into the unknown. I don't stop at, I don't know. I start there, because I've learned that everyone who has ever done something great had one thing in common. They accepted what they didn't know, and moved anyway. Don't buy into the early lie that you need credentials, experience, or permission to do something big. All you need is a reason strong enough that you can't not do it. I started SpaceX not because I was an aerospace expert, but because I couldn't stand watching the future of humanity be limited to Earth. I didn't know how to build the Merlin engine when I began, but I knew no one else did either, because it hadn't existed yet, and that realization gave me the freedom to learn, to fail, to adjust, and to push until it worked. There's a kind of arrogance that says, if I don't know, then no one should do it. I avoid that mindset. Instead, I believe that if I don't know, I have a responsibility to find out. And if you're holding on to an idea that you believe in, then I don't know how isn't a reason to quit. It's the reason to start. The world doesn't need more people who already know. It needs people insane enough to begin from zero and never stop at enough. Don't let I don't know be the end. Let it be the opening line. One of the most common illusions people believe in is the idea of being ready. When I have enough experience, I'll start. When I have the team, I'll build. When the timing is right, I'll go all in. When everything's clear, I'll move. But if you really zoom out and look, you'll realize no one was ever ready for anything great. Readiness is a concept invented by people who want to delay while still feeling safe. They don't say they're scared. They say they're not ready. It sounds smart, sounds reasonable, sounds mature. But in reality, it's just another name for paralysis. There is no perfect time, no ideal moment. Every major turning point in my life happened in chaos, pressure, shortage, and complete uncertainty. When I poured all my PayPal earnings into Tesla and SpaceX, I had no financial cushion, no backup plan. And I was far from ready, financially or mentally. But I knew if I didn't act, everything would die. And if I waited for a better moment, I'd just see another day pass. Nothing more. People often imagine Elon Musk as someone who maps everything out on a whiteboard before taking action. The truth is, I've had to build the bridge while running across it. I didn't wait for ideal conditions. I created them in motion. Progress doesn't come from readiness. It comes from movement, and movement comes from a very simple choice. Either you begin, even when it's blurry, or you wait forever until life runs out. I've seen too many smart people, full of potential, stuck in a loop of preparation. They read more, learn more, plan more. But when I check back 5 years later, they still haven't started. Not because they don't know, but because they're still waiting for a feeling called readiness that never arrives. Here's a truth you need to accept. You will always be missing something. There will always be a reason to delay. Always a risk ahead. But if you only begin when everything is certain, you're entering a game where all the rewards have already been claimed. Opportunity doesn't belong to those who are ready. It belongs to those who don't need to be. Those who jump before the path is clear. Those who say, "I will," before knowing how I will. Those who understand that action creates readiness, not the other way around. I used to think like you. I wanted things in place before I moved. But then I realized, life doesn't wait for your puzzle to align. It starts the moment you drop the first piece, and if you don't throw yourself into the game, you'll get thrown out of it. I have no fixed formula, just one principle. Start earlier than you think makes sense. Move before you feel confident. Act while others hesitate, not because you're naive, but because you know that feeling ready is just a byproduct of having already begun. I once asked an engineer, "Why haven't you tested this model?" He said, "Because I haven't finished all the assumptions." I said, "That's exactly why you should test. They're assumptions because you haven't tried." The reason he held back was because he was waiting for something that doesn't exist. Certainty. But in the real world, everything is volatile. You don't need certainty. You need to move and let reality give you feedback. Every time I launch a rocket, I know it could explode. And some did. But each time I didn't think, I should have waited longer. I thought, good. Now we have real data to improve. If you're unwilling to begin without being ready, you'll never evolve. Because mastery doesn't come from planning. It comes from collision. Action, feedback, experimentation, mistakes, adjustments, continuation. That's how everything great is born. Don't wait for another course, another certificate, another opinion, another perfect window. They will never all show up together. But if you begin, they will find you along the way. Don't trust the feeling of not enough. That feeling isn't a sign. It's the last fence between you and your first step. Break it. Move first. And you'll realize you were always enough. You just hadn't started yet. People aren't afraid of failure as much as they're afraid of being seen failing. That's the deeper fear. Not losing money, time, or effort, but losing image, losing face, losing credibility, losing approval. So they don't begin unless they're sure they'll succeed. But no one ever got far by playing safe, and nothing disruptive is ever guaranteed. I've heard the laughter all my life. Elon will fail with Tesla. He'll go bankrupt with SpaceX. He's a lunatic burning cash. They laughed when I said I'd build electric cars. They laughed when I said I'd send rockets up and land them again. They laughed when I said I'd put chips in people's brains. But I wasn't here to make them stop laughing. I was here to do what they'd never dare imagine. And when it became real, the same people who once laughed went silent. The truth is, laughter can't kill you unless you give it the power to decide your path. The fear of being laughed at makes you self-edit your ideas. It makes you underestimate yourself. It pushes you towards safe, reasonable, mediocre choices, rather than bold moves that could shift the game. I don't blame people for laughing. Most people only believe what they've already seen. They can't visualize what hasn't existed yet. And when they meet someone trying to build something far beyond their map, their instinct is to mock it. Because mocking protects their worldview. But if you stop because they laugh, you've chosen to live in their world, not the one you believe is possible. I've seen brilliant people give up because they couldn't stand being the punchline. They backed off when criticized, deleted posts when ridiculed, canceled projects when someone called them insane. But here's a cold truth you have to accept. The further ahead you go, the lonelier it gets. And the lonelier it gets, the more of a target you become. But you're not here to avoid being attacked. You're here to be the first to walk through a door no one else can see yet. If you need applause to keep going, then a single laugh is enough to stop you. But if you don't need agreement, if you only need a reason, no one can stand in your way. I wasn't raised to please the crowd. I trained myself to do what's right, even if it meant being misunderstood, ridiculed, or labeled as the eccentric billionaire burning cash. I've lost most of my fortune, nearly went bankrupt. Rockets exploded 3 times. Headlines mocked me. Stocks crashed. But I don't remember who laughed. I only remember that I didn't stop. And that made the difference. When you're willing to fail in public, you unchain yourself. You stop living for optics. You stop living in other people's minds. You return to your core, a human who's learning, doing, falling, rising, and moving toward what you believe is true, regardless of what anyone thinks. I don't need people to think I'm right. I just need to continue until I prove it. And even if I'm wrong, I still have the right to be wrong, because I'm the one in the arena. People outside the game are always right. They never fail, because they never try. But if you want to build something that matters, you have to be willing to be laughed at. You have to accept that what you believe will be opposed, what you do will be misunderstood, and what you fail at will be amplified. But you also have to understand, all of that is the price of freedom. The freedom to live without approval. The freedom to try without consensus. The freedom to fail without shame. And the freedom to succeed without apologizing for being right. Don't wait for the world to stop laughing before you begin. Because when they stop, you might not be doing anything laughable anymore. Instead of fearing laughter when you fail, fear never having had the courage to be laughed at. Because the moment you cross that line, that's when you become someone they never imagined. There's a kind of motivation that seems healthy on the surface but is actually dangerous, doing things to be praised. Praise is a double-edged sword. It makes you feel validated, but it also makes you dependent on validation. And if you act to be praised, you can be destroyed by a single insult. I've seen brilliant people stay stuck in comfort zones because they're afraid of losing the image others admire. They fear the next move might not look as polished. So they stop trying, stop evolving, and stop risking, just to protect applause. But nothing great is born from a need for praise. It's born from a feeling that you can't not do it, even when no one sees, no one claps, and no one names it. I didn't build Tesla to be celebrated in the press. I didn't create SpaceX to win awards. I didn't launch Neuralink to be labeled a genius. I built them because the world lacked them. Because I knew if I didn't, no one else would. If you need applause to keep going, the first round of boos will stop you. And if you need recognition to act, you'll never go beyond the boundaries society's willing to approve. The truth is, most worthwhile work isn't praised while it's being built. People only celebrate once it's done, clean, and easy to understand. But getting there requires a long walk through silence, doubt, failure, and being misunderstood. If you act for outer validation, you won't survive that dark stretch. I've had stretches where no one supported me, no investors, no media, no market. Just me and a few other crazies, believing in something the world didn't see yet. The early years of Tesla weren't glamorous. Rocket explosions weren't achievements. My sleepless nights weren't applauded. But if I needed praise to continue, it all would have ended long ago. I learned that when you truly believe in something, you must be willing to build it even if no one knows, no one notices, and no one appreciates it. Because real value doesn't come from stage lights. It comes from inner drive, the kind that moves you forward without an audience. Praise makes it easy to get addicted to the appearance of progress. You start doing things that get attention rather than things that matter. You start adjusting to applause rather than aligning with purpose. You chase more instead of going deeper. And somewhere along the way, you lose yourself. I once asked a young engineer, if you did the right thing and no one knew, would you still do it? He was silent. Because that's not a question most people are ready to answer. But for me, If the answer is no, then you're acting for image, not mission. People who live by image always have to protect it. People who live by truth only have to protect truth. Truth doesn't need decoration. It just needs to be pursued. If you truly want to build something meaningful, you must learn to work in silence, accept being overlooked, and stay persistent in the dark. Not because you don't deserve the light, but because real light only comes when the work is strong enough to shine on its own, without praise, without proof. Every great person I've met shares one trait. They do what's right, not what's praised. They might be applauded, but they're not addicted to it. And they never trade truth for comfort. I don't crave admiration. I crave integrity. And if that makes me seem cold, eccentric, or hard to understand, I accept it. Because I don't need the world to fully understand me. I just need to not betray what I know is right. Don't let praise define you. Don't let applause decide whether you continue. Don't do it because it will be liked. Do it. Because if you don't, no one else will. And if you need a reason to keep going, let it be the truth inside you, not the clapping outside. There's a question most people ask themselves, though rarely out loud. Am I on the right path? If the results aren't here yet? That's the final trap. It looks harmless, but quietly kills every long-term journey. I've watched people full of passion, ideas, and energy begin strong, then shrink, simply because after a few months, no visible success appeared. The project didn't make money. The content didn't get views. The product didn't sell. And they started doubting not just the process, but themselves. Am I good enough? Did I make the wrong choice? If this is right, why don't I see proof yet? The problem isn't the result. It's the speed at which you demand the result to arrive. Modern culture teaches us to define our worth by fast outcomes. Followers, views, revenue in 90 days, instant feedback, positive signals. And if none of that shows up in the first 6 months, we label ourselves not good enough. But the truth is, anything truly worth building takes longer than a few weeks to bear fruit. If I had measured myself by short-term results, I would have quit after the first rocket exploded, or the second, or the third. If I looked only at Tesla's early numbers, I would have thought I was a fool burning money. If I listened only to the market's initial reaction to Neuralink, I'd have believed I was insane. But I didn't build these things to win in months. I built them because they needed to exist, and I knew if I didn't carry them through, no one else would. I don't need short-term proof to know I'm on the right path. I need a vision long enough to survive stretches where nothing seems to work. I call that the mandatory silence. It's the phase with no praise, no obvious traction, no growth metrics, just you and the work you believe in. If you get through that, you enter a place most people never reach, the space of unconditional persistence. I don't dismiss data, but I don't let temporary numbers define long-term ability. I listen to feedback, but I won't trade vision for validation, because I know some things require completing their cycle, and you can't rush a 10-year arc into 10 days. If you only act when results appear, you're not leading. You're chasing rewards, and rewards always arrive later than the work. I've felt discouraged. I've doubted, but I've never let short-term absence of results be my reason to stop. I keep going because I know it's right, and I let results show up when they're ready, not when I need them to continue. Some of the things you do today won't yield fruit for years. Do them anyway, because if you don't, the future you want will never arrive. And if you quit every time the outcome isn't instant, you live like a pendulum, swinging between hope and disappointment, never reaching the depth of true mission. I'm not good at enduring failure, but I'm better at accepting that some things won't look like results in the way others expect. And I keep going. You don't need instant proof. You need a reason strong enough to stand when there's no proof at all. Don't measure yourself by speed. Don't define yourself by likes, sales, or views. Don't let any dashboard limit the potential you haven't even begun to uncover. If you're doing the right thing, and you know it, keep going. Even if it's quiet. Even if no one believes. Even if you're the last one standing. Because results don't define you. They arrive only after you've redefined yourself.